The eerie silence of the empty street weighed heavily on Sarah's heart as she walked back from the local grocery store. A feeling of desolation had settled over her small town ever since the tragic accident that had taken the lives of so many of its residents. The once bustling community now seemed like a ghost town, a place haunted by memories of happier times. Sarah had been one of the lucky ones who had survived the accident, but she couldn't help feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt that gnawed at her like a persistent itch. She had been on that fateful bus, the one that had skidded on the icy road and careened into the ravine, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. As she unpacked the groceries and placed them on the kitchen counter, Sarah couldn't shake off the image of her fellow passengers screaming in terror as the bus plummeted into the ravine. She had been sitting in the back, and when the dust and chaos had settled, she found herself relatively unscathed. A few cuts and bruises, but nothing compared to the injuries suffered by those around her. The guilt started creeping in as she realized that her survival had come at the expense of others. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had become part of her tight-knit community had lost their lives. Every face that had once smiled at her was now a memory, a haunting reminder of the life she had stolen from them. Sarah tried to go about her daily routine, but it was a constant battle against the guilt that consumed her. She'd go to the bakery and see the empty seat where Mrs. Baker used to chat with her about the latest town gossip. She'd visit the park and remember the laughter of children who would never play there again. The town she had known and loved was irrevocably changed, and she couldn't escape the guilt that she was somehow responsible. One evening, as Sarah sat alone in her living room, her friend Rachel knocked on the door. Rachel had lost her husband in the accident, and Sarah couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread. She opened the door, and they exchanged a hug that carried the weight of the world. Rachel's eyes were red from crying, and she seemed to have aged years in the short time since the accident. "Sarah, I just wanted to check on you," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "I know you survived, but I can't help but feel relieved that at least someone I know made it out." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked into her friend's grief-stricken face. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. I wish I could have done something to save them, to change what happened." Rachel shook her head, a tear rolling down her cheek. "It's not your fault, Sarah. You survived, and we need to stick together in these tough times. We all need each other now more than ever." They spent the evening sharing stories of their lost loved ones, the memories they cherished, and the dreams that would never come to fruition. Sarah realized that her guilt wasn't helping anyone. It was only driving a wedge between her and the people who needed her the most. She needed to find a way to heal, not just for herself, but for the sake of her grieving community. In the weeks that followed, Sarah attended grief counseling sessions and support groups with Rachel and other survivors. Sharing her feelings and listening to others who had experienced similar guilt helped her gradually come to terms with the tragedy. She understood that survival wasn't a choice, and her guilt was an unwarranted burden. Sarah also decided to take a more active role in helping the town rebuild. She organized fundraisers, volunteered at the local community center, and worked with others to create a memorial to honor the lives lost in the accident. The memorial brought some closure to the grieving families and gave the survivors a way to remember their loved ones. Over time, Sarah's guilt began to lessen, replaced by a sense of purpose. She knew that she couldn't change the past, but she could make a difference in the present and the future. The town slowly began to heal, and the sense of community that had been shattered was rebuilt, stronger than ever. In the end, Sarah realized that survivor's guilt was a natural response to tragedy, but it didn't have to define her. She had the power to turn her guilt into a force for good, a driving motivation to help her community heal and grow. Left behind, she discovered a way to move forward, holding on to the memories of those she had lost. and living a life they would have been proud of. As time passed, the small town began to regain some of its vibrancy. The laughter of children echoed through the park, and new friendships were formed. While the scars of the past would never completely fade, they served as a reminder of the strength and resilience of a community that had faced tragedy together and emerged stronger on the other side.